No, that muted the speakers, so I get feedback. Am I sharing? Looks like I'm sharing.
Yep, I can see it. Thank you.
Okay.
You're great.
So that's maybe a good point to talk about too. Point clouds, especially color. Every single point is a different color, even if they look the same, which means they do not compress. And so things like GoToMeetings, if you have them open in Navisworks, which you can do, and they're color scans, you need to move very, very slowly if you're on a GoToMeeting, because the image will not get any kind of image compression. If you're doing screenshots, an average screenshot of a color point cloud can be 4 or 5 megabytes for a JPEG, because it just can't get any compression, because every single dot, every pixel in that image is a slightly different color and there's nothing to compress. So it's important to know, especially on GoToMeetings, because on your screen it's flying around, you're moving around quick, and for the people on the other end, they're not seeing anything because it never catches up to what you're doing. And they're just seeing little slivers on their screen. And I'll promptly forget I said that and move real quick. Yeah. So have people used Recap? Do you know what Recap is? Probably, yes, no, maybe.
A quick recap.
A quick recap on Recap? Yeah, okay. So Recap started as a company called Allpoints, and it changed a lot of things. The big one when it was Allpoints that it changed is it allowed targetless registration, which is a very, so in simple terms, it means we don't go to the field with hundreds of targets anymore that stitch our two scans together. We can tie scans, one scan to the next scan to the next scan without any reference points. It uses the point cloud itself as reference and locks the two together. So an average job, a small job, is going to be 20 scans. Average projects for us go into the 100 to 500 range. Large projects for us go up to 10,000 scans. When you start locking all these together, anything up to, I would say, a medium project is perfectly fine without targets now with Recap. And that's how we're getting the 28 scans an hour. When we were on targets, the best we could achieve with targets was about 10 minutes a scan or 6 scans an hour. That's a pretty big difference from 2 minutes a scan. So we're able to scan an awful lot in a very short time because of Recap. The other software, Ferrocene, Leica, Cyclone, they also claim to do targetless registration. They don't. They do an okay job. You can make it work. It's a huge pain and it takes forever. Recap works. It works really well. And one of the things, depending on who you deal with, if you deal with especially civil companies, if you're sourcing the work out, they might want to tell you that this is less accurate than targets. That's simply not true. This is looking at the entire point cloud and fitting the two together. When you targets, it looks at a single dot in space and ties that together. And every connection will have an error. Every single one guaranteed has an error. And what happens on especially larger projects is, as is a way in life, error has a way of not normalizing. So for whatever reason, every scan is a millimeter off in the same direction, due north, for whatever reason, because there's a problem with your targets or something, and it repeats, and now your scan over time stretches. Then that is the big fear for any of us who do this for a living, is that we get back to the office and our data doesn't fit. We know for a fact, because we did our in the field, that the center to center of a column, let's say, is 50 feet. We measured, we know that's true, it's 49 and change, but we measured and we laid our data over and it's not. It doesn't fit. What that means is that we lost control at some point in our scanning, and then we didn't figure it out. In Recap, with this workflow, that has never been done. It just gets it that tight and that locked in. So now the exception is when you get to very, very large projects. There you are going to want to do targets. You do want to do a control network, they call it. And there's all kinds of techniques where we'll do a loop of a control and then stitch onto it with Recap. Things like that that make it very efficient. but you do need it at that point. If for nothing else, you cannot register 10,000 scans in recap. Even 1,000 tough. So 200, 300, 400, 500, you're okay. 500 if they're high res. We were into some serious problems that you could register, but you could not export into a format. So there are limits, and you need to plan the project accordingly. Structure the data. You would never want to work with 500 scans in, let's say, Revit, AutoCAD. That would be a bad idea. So what you want to do is take it and recap and subdivide it. So it's actually done. This has been up. This customer will carry floor equipment, so the roof and ceiling are all gone. The only thing we're seeing is what's on the floor. And as I said, I promptly forgot, and I'm flying around in here. You can see pretty high resolution color that we're getting. And it will fill in a little bit more as it sits there for a second. So recap changed everything about how we actually collect the data in the field and how we register it together. That's kind of the one part that it changed. The other part is that when Autodesk bought them, it was part of a bigger strategic move to embed point cloud support into every Autodesk product. And so it's still been rolling out, but it's pretty much done at this point, that the files that come out of recap for no extra cost go into every Autodesk product. Well, every product that all of us use on a day-to-day basis. You know, the big ones: Revit, 3D Max, AutoCAD, all the verticals to AutoCAD, Inventor. It works in all of them. And it works just as if you were attaching a reference or a link in Revit. It respects section cuts and floors and elevations. It does everything you would expect another, let's say, Revit model that was linked in to do. That's huge, because just a few years ago, there was absolutely no way to get a point cloud into Revit. Despite it already being the dominant tool, there was no means to get points into Revit. No reasonable means. You can always write these things out to a DXF and throw a monster DXF at Revit and not have a good time. But this goes into Revit very quickly without much of a problem now. And recap represents that ability to do that. The workflow that Autodesk has in mind when they developed recap is basically a free product that comes, if you own anything on Autodesk, you probably own recap with it. And the idea is you'd run recap in parallel with your design application, whether it's Revit, AutoCAD. In recap, you would click out Windows, isolate areas, they write out pretty quickly, and then bring in a more manageable data set into your working file. So that leads to actually a question that down attention today was alignment, which is actually been a lot lately. I'm sure all of you that work in Revit face this all the time, of project origin points, UCSs, right? Data needs to drop in and align, and that needs to be planned ahead of time. Because right now, actually probably literally right now, I have people working and they're exporting data right now of a giant point cloud that we did for floor. That data is set up so that floor is 100 feet above where it really is for referencing into Revit, and it has a logical origin point that was agreed to by the team. In this case, it's column B16 in the factory. So that when the Revit model's set up, everything's set up, it drops in right on top. Doing that and getting that alignment needs to be planned ahead of time and needs to be thought through. There's tools that are built into recap that will make you think that you can do it. Right here, update origin. We'll walk you through updating the origin point and establishing your coordinates. It works okay on some very small projects. So if we scanned this room, that's probably how we would do it. On bigger projects, this is dangerous. In all modern scanners, they have what are known as level compensators, which hold level to an enormous degree. They're not as good as total stations, but this will maintain a fraction of a millimeter level at 130 meters out. And it knows that even if it moves during the scan because the floor is vibrating, every single point that's coming in, it has a compensator that's accounting for if the machine has gone out of level. Recap has absolutely no problem sending your scan out of level. That's a huge problem. Level is the hands down most important thing in scanning. If you ever lose control level, you are in big trouble. Because in real life, there is nothing that is level, and nothing that is level enough to use as a reference. So this floor might look flat, it's absolutely not. So if your scans get out of level, how are you ever going to get them back? What are you going to reference in that scan to reestablish level? So you need to be very careful that you've used the right techniques to establish level and that it's not manipulated through the use of that button. That's a very important concept, because there's just the worst projects I've ever worked on always came down to bad level. That we just didn't hold control, and the floor we assumed was actually dipping in real life. It was not. And then the whole scan tips down, everything's out of plumb, vertical or horizontal and vertical distances, X and Y's, start compressing, depending on how it's tilted, and all of a sudden things get put in the wrong spot, models get developed that are incorrect, and it has a compounding effect. So very important that you maintain level. Right. So another part of recap is obviously visualization. You can see when the scans are massed together, it looks pretty good. I'm trying to find an individual scan. And my computer decided not to cooperate. Oh, there we go. So at better resolutions, you'll see transparent orbs that float all over the scan. Those are the individual scan locations. Anytime you can jump into one of those and get the absolute maximum number of points were actually captured. That's the only way to ever see 100% of the capture points in recap and mental applications. It down samples the points. We capture way too many. I can't display them all on the screen. The only way is to jump into the individual scans. Holy cow, something's going wrong on my computer. So here, this is what a full res scan looks like. In this case, it really does look like the photographs, but it is dimensionally accurate. So you can measure in here. What is it? The points are there. Yep. Yeah, I think what Recap's maybe doing is overlaying the two. But I also don't think Recap supports photos, so I'm not sure what it's doing. It might be, I mean, this is the resolution we're capturing. These don't, from a resolution standpoint, do not look different in black and white when we didn't run the camera. It's the same level of quality. I could still read that text on that box. Right. Well, sort of. I mean, you can see when we go to the overall, we're looking at multiple scans, you see weird shadows and overlap, and it's not nearly as crisp as a single scan. Yep. Another thing you can do is you can upload to Recap 360. Pretty neat, especially for collaboration. This is my Recap 360. Open the project real quick. All in the web browser. Yes, it can be shared. Yep. One scan's usually going to be 150 meg, give or take. It's not bad until you do 10,000. Yeah, it's a big part of data management's a huge part of my business. Is managing this appropriately, ensuring things get backed up. Obviously, when we go and we scan in Mexico or I scan in Nicaragua and in many different places, you never ever want to lose that data. So you have to be very careful, which means so if we collect a terabyte of data, we need capacity to store it on at least 2 other devices. We are never going to leave that site till we have 3 copies of the data. And those copies are in different people's possession. They're never in the same bag and all that, right? Because we don't ever want to have to get back on a plane and go back to Mexico to redo the job because an SD card went bad. No, we don't go quite to that extreme, but we are extremely careful. I think what we should do is maybe mail one set of the data back. I'm very paranoid because I've had this happen. When I was younger and more foolish, I have lost data and had to call the customer and say, I know I owed this to you, we have to fly back there, and then I had to go to my boss and tell him that we're eating all this cost. So I'm very sensitive to that. 130 meters. Yep.
Is that from the scanner head?
Right.
130 meters
From that point, right there. Yep. Radius. Yep.
130 meters with diameter or
Radius.
Oh.
Yep. Now that's somewhat deceiving, as maybe you're alluding to. At 130 meters, it's going to be a point every foot,
right,
because it's a triangle that's going out, right? It's you're setting your resolutions and right, yeah. So if you cared about if you're scanning the facade of a building and you cared to know if it was leaning, if it was out of plumb, you could collect sufficient data at 130 meters to do that. You'd have other problems with angles and incidents and materials and everything, but it does record data at 130 meters. There's another unit that does go to 330 meters. Yeah, okay. You need to tell me what you just said. Yeah, so we need to know what we're getting into, and we talk a lot about this. Any new customer we have, you should expect, if you go to a provider and not doing the work yourself, you should expect a lot of very intense questioning. If you're not getting that, you might want to go somewhere else. If they say, oh, we got it, tell us where to go, what's the address, how many square feet, that's terrifying. You're going to tell you things, color, double the cost to scan. It's, more than twice the runtime. If it's a bigger job, we can do things like have people run multiple scanners to get that down, but it's going to be much more expensive. It increases our processing, storage, all this. Above ceiling, 2.5 times the cost. So if you want us to do floor plus above ceiling, 2.5 times the cost, and we're going to have a lot of questions for you. What are we getting into? What's the interstitial space? What are we going to find when we pop the ceiling tiles? Is it occupied space? If it's occupied space, I need to hire a cleaning crew to follow behind because I can't pull that tile and not drop a load of junk on what's below it. So I need someone behind me that's coming in and is going to clean off the desks, that's going to go before me and tarp over things that are important. These are all the kind of questions you should expect. The neat thing is nowadays, with recap, it is much easier for us to get above the ceiling. We don't have to pair up with a surveyor. We can set that point right there to the level of the drop ceilings. We'll pop one tile, we'll put it up to that level, and we'll run it. We're getting enough data below and enough above that we can stitch the two together. Historically, that had to be done with some tricky surveying techniques where you'd actually survey in the location of the scanner. You would have a very solid tripod, so you only went vertical, and a lot of complication. Now we use, with this, we have a big camera boom. Lets us just push the thing up in the air, good to go, run it from a tablet, hit go, and it does its thing. Much, much easier. Before, unless I really liked you, I just wouldn't have bid on the job if it was above ceiling, because it was just crap work. Now it's not so bad. You know, we can do it pretty quick. But it definitely is more expensive, and there's certain situations that we cannot do. If we pop a ceiling tile and there's 3 inches to a duct, there's nothing we can do. We can't scan that. We can't, if that's how the whole ceiling is, and every one we go to pop, there's something in there. Even this room where there's a lot of stuff going on, unless, depending on, you know, if we pop that tile and we're clear, we can do it. But don't expect to get 100% capture up in that space unless it's a building scheduled for demo and we can come in and we'll do you a favor and demo the drop ceiling for you. You know, but if it's this building, the drop ceiling needs to stay, it's a fair amount of work, right? And we're going to be very careful. We track all the ceiling tiles because you can't put them back in the wrong order and things like that. There's fading patterns and things that have gone on. It definitely complicates things, so we need to talk. Hospitals, we've been doing a fair amount of hospitals work lately. A lot of discussions there. You know, where can we be? When can we be there? If we're going above ceiling, what are the concerns of that? If we're going to generate dust, do we need to tarp off the doors? Do we need to seal things? Do we need positive pressure? A lot of very complicated discussions. Office spaces, pretty straightforward. It's occupied. We have a cleaning crew. They come behind. They go before. Done. Simple. It just costs a little more. Exterior scanning. You need to be somewhat flexible on your dates. We can't do it in the rain. We can't do it in the snow. We can do it in the cold to an extent. There's actually grease and things in here that at a certain temperature, they start to thicken up. The scanner senses that has happened, and it will not let us scan. So what we can do is we can take it in, we can warm it up, we can run out, we can do a scan really quick. I've been successful down to about -10, but it takes a long time because you get one scan and half the time it doesn't work and you're doing another one. In Nicaragua, we tried to do it at -40 in a blast freezer, and it did not work. We just couldn't get it warm enough to get a complete scan done before it lost its temperature and locked up on us. So things like that obviously have an impact on it. People, pedestrians in general, not a problem. It's up to you if it matters to you and what you want to do with the data. They're going to be in there. They can be cleaned out. We can go in and erase them out and recap. Not a huge problem for us. Doesn't take a ton of time. But it makes a mess of the point cloud. So it's all what you want to use it for. Any questions? You're asking on settings. We tend to go with attitude. We target that 2-minute runtime. Lower res, more scans. That's, to me, especially on interior scanning, is the way to go. We don't want to set up in this room twice and run at a higher res. We want to set up and do scan, 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 and work our way across the room and collect more data from different angles. We just see better. Yep. Yeah, target list, it matters too. Yeah. So when we did, so this is it running, by the way. When we did scanning with targets, we could go, I think we went up to 150 feet between scans. And that really wasn't a problem. If we could acquire the targets, we were okay. Now we want to stay within about 20 feet. That makes sure we get good overlap and the scans are going to lock together. Other challenges can be really wide open spaces. Warehouses that are empty can be tough. And we can actually go in there and we'll throw boxes and things around the warehouse to make sure we get a good lock. So now that was its, the scanner ran, now it's doing its pictures. My scanner. It gives you an idea what it's doing. It's going to go through and just image each thing. This obviously takes a lot longer than the scan itself. Any questions? Yep. Uh-huh.
And I was having a really hard time with things with
Mm-hmm.
they had moved the point cloud to actual connect.
Ooh.
And
Yep. Yep. You're right. Yeah.
So it would come in, but it just wouldn't activate.
Yep.
And it took quite a bit to figure out if they just had to move it to do anything else.
Right. The problem with that is, so we're doing like I said, a pretty sizable project, and it's taken us several weeks to churn through all this data and process it. Once we do that, there's RCP files. Those are recap project files. Those are where all the work is done, but that's never what you actually want to reference into Revit. What you want to reference into Revit are what are called RCS files, which are unified point clouds, and they're properly indexed. And there's a whole technical side to why that's important, but it is very important in performance. We lock the coordinates in the RCP file. Then, depending on the size of the project, we have several weeks worth of work to generate all the RCS files that are going to be used on the project. We're going to do things like make a set of data that doesn't have a floor in it, because about 30% roughly of your data is on the floor, which is 30% of your file size, which is 30% of your performance hit in Revit, for a floor that you absolutely don't need if this was located properly. So you can speed everything up by 30% if you clip just the floor out. Things like that. That takes a long time. If we then ship that data and someone comes back to me and says, it's not aligned right, oh boy. Now I've got to go all the way back to the RCP and that process starts over again. On a small project, 100,000 square feet and below, that's really not a problem. We can turn it around pretty quick. You're still going to get a bill from me because it's going to take a lot of hours to do it, unless I forgot to ask you and I screwed it up. But coordinates are so very important. And I mean, it's not just for point clouds. Coordinates are important for all the work that we do. We can't just arbitrarily pick base points and shift buildings around. And this ties into maybe the next thing I was going to talk about, the GSA standard. You just can't shift things around. Buildings need to have a known datum. They need to stick to that datum, not just for the project, but through their life cycle. And, it's a bigger industry problem, but it definitely needs to be handled correctly. Otherwise, you run into what you did. And point clouds that are shot way out in space do not respond well. They tend to flash in and out of existence as you orbit around. You see it, you think you have it, you try to zoom in to move it, and it vanishes. Yeah. Yep.
It happens with Revit, also with surveys as well. The surveys are kind of similar to
Yep.
usually Revit will give you an error right away saying you're
right. I think it's been a while for me, but I think that's where you're going to get into using shared coordinates so that you can synchronize that data. And there's people here know a lot more about Revit than I do, but I think that's where that comes in. Okay, yeah. I don't think I think that's a problem. It cannot. Point clouds do not respect shared coordinates, I think. Is that a true statement? Right, the 20 mile. Yeah. Right. 20 mile separation between any two things is a problem. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What could she have given you before we got going? What exchange of data
I'm going to ask for your Revit model. Assuming your project's being done in Revit, right, that it's not going to move. I'm going to take it, I'm going to look at your Revit model, identify where the origin point is, and then ask you directly, is this the correct origin point? I'm not going to have you tell me because I don't know if I'm talking to the right person. I'm not going to accept an AutoCAD grid if I know the work's being done in Revit because that might have been shifted. I want to see your Revit model. I'm going to investigate to find the origin point and ask you if this is in fact the correct origin point that you want.
Yeah, this is a good point. So we have a firm I work with, a lot of projects, a lot of different people, a lot of different levels of expertise. We try to make sure that everyone knows sort of enough things to get by, but it's possible that where we're supposed to use shared coordinates in Revit, that a specific team, a specific person on the project may not be, may not have set that up yet. May get too involved before that gets set up, and then when it gets set up, it may screw things up. So this is something for people, I guess I'm not gonna flag myself.
It's bigger than point clouds. It's an industry challenge, I would say, is agreeing to that common base point and carrying it through the project and in bigger sense of the life cycle of the building. When these things just arbitrarily move around, it's a problem for everyone. Yeah. No, because of there's depending on the product. So, well, you're going to go D in the computer science a little too much, but the reason Revit has that limitation of 20 miles is a floating point calculation problem, that it needs to track data out to too many positions, and the math becomes harder and harder for the computer to do. So they chose that as a hard limit. It's actually not 20 miles. What it is Revit stores data in feet, and it's a mathematical bit equivalent that's close to 20 miles of what that digit can be stored in memory and passed through to the CPU to be calculated. Different programs have different limitations. One of the reasons why AutoCAD is so awful slow is it doesn't have that limitation, and it'll let you draw the universe to scale. It doesn't care. But the bigger your scale gets, the more this thing just grinds to a halt, because the math involved in calculating, if I move a circle from here to here, the math involved in that move, and my origin point is 856 light years away, is enormous. And the CPU has to then chunk it up. It exceeds what it can even handle in a pass, and yeah. So GPS, when we do, so I guess maybe that's where when we scan, we sometimes have projects where we do locate based on GPS that's shared with a surveyor, because our data might be used by multiple people, and so we produce multiple export sets. One will align to some known exterior benchmark, maybe section corners, street intersections, survey tags, things like that. And it's going to be true position, right, where it's, turned or north is really north and all that. And it's to be used for the site plan and surveying information. Then we'll create another set of data that's for use in architecture. And that's going to have the building squared up to Project North and be on the right origin point.
I went to another origin point here on the way, and they were talking about areas.
Mm-hmm. It does. That's how those actually somewhat work, yeah. Are you talking about the drones that do it? Yeah. So that's not, a lot of people want me to start doing it. I've resisted it. It's just not our thing. There's a lot of problems, with it. But there's people out there, in particular Autodesk can set you up with this. If you have a very large area to scan outside in the hundreds of acres, they will come and they can do it with a drone with a camera on it, just a digital camera, no scanner. They can take thousands of photos and convert that to a point cloud, a semi-accurate, semi-located point cloud. The stuff I've heard quoted is plus minus an inch. When you're dealing with 700 acres, plus minus an inch is phenomenal. So So it's, I mean, it's better than you could probably achieve with conventional survey. And they do that through a lot of weird techniques. They use these huge targets that can be seen from way up in the air, and a lot of interesting things. It's neat if you're just interested in it, even if you don't have an application for it. And it's maybe the future of this. In 10 years, this will be gone, and it will all just be cameras. It'll just be the camera. The camera can be converted to a point cloud. We're not there yet, but it's getting close. Hmm? Really? Okay. I know it didn't. I wonder if they fixed the other thing that was annoying was it was always I'm gonna get the terminology. I'm gonna use AutoCAD terminology. Attach versus overlay. What is the Revit terminology different? No, it's the same. Okay, they were always attached, which meant if one person on a project attached this giant point cloud from the server, God forbid, and you go and open it and it happens to be attached, it's coming along for the ride. And Revit's going to take an hour and a half to open as it tries to stream, 27 gig from your network drive. Yeah. Yeah.
Does it warn you? I mean, do you
No.
see how much that?
No. Revit doesn't like to warn you. Yeah. 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 It's like we're going to update your project to the newest version without a warning. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Does anybody have any more questions about the latest game?
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing that tonight.
Yeah.
So just one, how much is
I have
GSA
time.
standard? Yeah, but
It's a massive standard. It goes everything from data creation to FM.
Well, how about we take just 3 minutes, so at 20 after on that clock, we'll let Chris get started on as much GSA standards as whoever is still here would like to talk about. So you're welcome. Everybody's welcome to stay. But if you want to escape before the GSA standards, I understand completely. So take 5.
Chris, I knew you had some tricky stuff, but I didn't realize that stuff. Like before not being level, reference function not being level.
Level is the bane of my existence. Of anyone
I would
who
have
does
just
it.
thought that one, maybe two or 3 points, like to find a plane would you'd be able to set things.
The problem is that in life, nothing's level, right? And certainly nothing is
Three
level.
points really aren't just the same plane.
You can square up to any plane you wanted, but that plane's not level. And now,
Oh, man.
and level, setting level in this room, who cares, right? It doesn't matter if I'm off by a degree. Setting level in a 1 million square foot assembly plant, if we're off by 1,000th of a degree, we're out by inches at the end of the plant. Yeah, it gets bad. Yeah. Well, maybe not 1,000, maybe 100. 1,000s would probably be all right. Yeah. But yeah,
You got some heavy duty headaches. I got some headaches.
oh yeah, it's all the same. Yeah. Well, I've done so much of this now that it's pretty straightforward, and it's frustrating to me. A lot of people out there aren't following the techniques, and it's tough. It's
Undercutting you, but not doing it properly.
it depends. We're pretty cost effective, but it's they give it a bad name. I talk to a lot of people, and they're like, oh, scanning. This happened or that happened, or structuring data is so important. When you're dealing, some of our big projects are, terabyte data set. It needs to be structured well, very well and very effective. Like removing the floor, simple thing, but you dump 30% of the data to process.
So it transmits data wirelessly to your computer, or no, you have to download it? Oh, I see. Oh, gotcha.
And so we can swap it. But depending on what we do, sometimes we'll have people go out. One's doing registration in the field, while the other one is scanning.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Nice. Oh, look at that. That's goes a long way. I used to run the early Cyrus. That's cool. For a long time, yeah. That was a lot of
Like
fun.
25s or?
Yeah, 25 over and
That's what I was talking about. The box.
the 25 like right up to the scan station.
Okay. Yeah.
That was my niche.
Yeah.
It's interesting though, this one's a lot faster because it's not doing the digital photo at the same time. It comes in after the fact.
Yep.
And it's a lot newer machine too. It's 10 years ago.
Right, so it's those ones, the originals were all time of flight, which meant you had to wait for a return before you could send a beam out again.
Yeah.
These are all phase shift.
Yeah, sure.
So they send out three waveforms constantly cycling, and it just goes.
Yeah, and it blasts through.
The
It's like
crazy part is,
it's like the ZNF.
well, yeah, but see, the ZNF has it's a limitation of light. The wavelengths you can use top out at 73 meters, and then so if you exceed 73 meters, what comes back is ambiguous.
Right.
Was
Yeah.
it the first 73 or the second 73?
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And so how they figured it out, how they got to 1 to 130, well, this actually is 120 in the slope. They got to 130, and they got to 330. I have no idea how they did that.
Yeah.
Because wavelengths top out at a certain limit. I don't know. Oh, I know how
We
they
broke
did it. It's
it.
an infrared.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
an
okay.
infrared, that's how.
That could be a different
Infrared's
type of
longer
light. Sure.
wavelength.
That
It
makes
just
sense.
occurred to me.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Solved the mystery today.
Yeah,
Yeah,
fantastic.
mystery to me. Sure not to the people that built it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I was scanning, the outside of the fraternity house.
Uh-huh.
And I got part of downtown, a ways away. Big building.
Oh, yeah.
Sticking out over top of
It was a 330, yeah, it's amazing, yeah. Yeah. We, when we bought this one, the 130s and 330s were already out. There's a slight difference in the data they collect.
Okay.
And so we already had 120s, and so we actually had to beg and plead to get them to sell us one of these. It's one of their demo units, because we run both, and when we mix it and they overlap, the data is, it's hard to explain. One's not better or worse, it's different. And so when they register together, it just looks kind of funky. Yeah. Even if they're run at the same setting, it just comes out different. Yeah. Yeah. This was a cool building. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep.
For the most part, I use Zoom. I don't.
Oh, okay. Even with like target list, is it working? Get like good? Like how fast?
Target list is much faster than target list.
Oh, definitely. But how quick can like? So we do. I'd say on average at least 100 scans a day through recap. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. For me, it's all about speed, right? It's let's get this moving. Let's churn through the scans. Yeah. Yeah.
Still varies.
Yeah.
Like a big project, the biggest one I've ever done is 120.
Okay. Which is good size. 100,000 is kind of the cutoff. That's a big project at 120. Yeah.
That was using target. That was before I knew I could do target list.
Yeah.
Because we did updates to the new version of the
That supported that. Yeah. Yeah. Have you ever? Oh damn! I don't have the right recap.
I've never used recap, but I've created, converted to something I can make out of that.
Right. Yep.
So, and I've heard people using recap for processing, but I haven't tried it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, no. You heard Imagine it bring up recap is it's the first of this new wave of products. You can't buy it.
Sorry?
You can't buy it. It's
Got it.
well, the Recap Pro that lets you do the registration. You can't buy it. It's rented. It's software as a service only. You can buy it for a month or a year, and that's it. And that whole model is
I don't use the program.
right. It's a pain in the ass because it's actually attached to an Autodesk username. So we have a couple licenses of it, but we have to keep bouncing it around because I don't have one for every user. Like normally you get a network license, right? And everyone can just pull it as needed.
I like that.
Not with this. It's tied to an individual user account. it's just a pain, you know, you gotta go into manage and you move it to this person and, you know, so right now our licenses are with other guys. I don't have pro because I forgot to switch it this morning. I actually could do it, but I think they're still working right now. I don't want to get locked out. Yeah. Yeah. It's neat, and they've actually incorporated targets in it too, so you can do targets and like that. Which matters for two things. So the mega jobs, where what we do on a huge project is we'll do a targeted control loop. Hey, good seeing you again. Yeah. Oh, thanks. Yeah, definitely. Where are you at now? Huh? The old Smith group? No. Smith. Oh, okay. Yeah. Cool.
But he's not Smith in Newman Smith. We don't know. You're right. Maybe you are now.
It's unclear.
Your partner already?
I'm working on it.
Nice job.
Cool. Yeah, I like that. Okay. Let's do a Revit project together someday. How about that?
We've tried.
I know. Let's try again.
Good seeing you.
So, like, what topics do you have for discussion, or what? Like, how would you?
For the standard?
Yeah.
I just gotta go through it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Fantastic.
Yeah.
I like it. All right, GSA folks.
Just wanted to warn you about something. In the middle of Chris's presentation, I shut my laptop down.
Oh.
It might have been recording all that time. So you might want to chop that video down.
I'll download it and see what we got. I don't know. First try with this thing, yeah.
So I pressed log out and got out of there. So I thought, oh, geez, that was the whole thing.
Okay, cool. Well, unless you were looking at naughty pictures, it's not
Sorry
a big a
about
deal.
that.
I was on a web meeting the other day, and somebody forgot they were the presenter because the conversation got sidetracked, and all of a sudden, they just started searching used cars. And I'm kind of sitting there, I'm like, do I want to be the one? Do I want to be the bad guy here and make this person feel terrible? But it's like watching this slow motion train wreck. Like, what are they gonna do next? Oh no, are they gonna do their home baking next? Like, oh no. I'm like, I feel like I should say something, but now I'm in too deep. I can't.
So how did it continue?
Yeah, for a while.
Oh wow, that's funny.
Yep. Somebody finally said, "Hey, can we get back to the presentation?" And also, his mouth scrambles around and the presentation back up.
Oh, that's too funny.
Yeah.
Good thing he didn't badmouth anybody.
Oh yeah. I've been in those meetings too. Yeah. You think you're on mute and.
Yeah, I know somebody that always double checks. Can you hear me? Is his technique to make sure that
smart person.
To make sure his mute is really.
It's a very smart person.
Yeah, I never thought of that.
Yeah. Smarter person is you just don't badmouth the other person and run the risk, right? Yeah. Save that till after the meeting.
That's true.
Yeah.
If you want to go to our conference, don't hang up. Say goodbye.
Oh yeah, never hang up.
I hear people that forget to hang up every time.
Oh yeah.
Oh
yeah.
Everyone be quiet and listen.
Oh yeah.
It's always like a group that just goes on. Oh,
that's
I've been the victim of that too. I've forgotten I've been hosting a meeting, and I looked out. It's 3 hours later, and it's still going. Like, oh.
And you're looking at the email and everything.
Yeah, whatever, right? Yeah. Okay. So.
Question is Richard G or V still quite involved in the Region 5?
He was. So he's the one I worked with to write it. Yep.
So he still is.
I don't know. Last I got a call about 6 months ago now to do an update with him, and unfortunately I didn't have the time to do it. Looks like he hasn't done it. So as of 6 months ago, he was. Okay. Yep. Yeah. So has anyone? Obviously, you are semi-familiar with it then, if you know Richard. So this all started about 2010, I think, on a big project to redo a bunch of buildings in Chicago Federal Center. And it started to become very apparent that the lack of any kind of standard was a real problem. So at the time I was with Ghaffari, and they contracted us to write the standard for them and start working on it. And it's kind of a neat process because we had a bunch of fact gathering meetings that you can really only pull off when the GSA is involved. It's the only time you can get all these people to actually show up. Tons of people from construction companies. I think the first meetings we had almost 100 people at that would come in and gave input into what they thought was important. From that spurred version 1, then we went to version 2 and 3, and now 4 was last updated. We released it in July 2013, and it appears it's still the static one. It's a hosted site. GSA's is on Google Docs. That's what they use as their email and word processing platform, so it made sense. This is a GSA hosted site, despite the fact that it says Google in the name. It's their site. It's part of their thing. They control access to it. It's one of the many battles I would have with Richard over the course of this to try to get him to do what I thought was the right thing. I thought this should be public. I still think it should be, and I think it could be if anybody wants to file a Freedom of Information Act. It frustrates me that he won't make it public. That it's locked up. He gives certain people access to it. Because I think there's a lot of stuff in here that's not covered in other standards out there. It has some of the basics, BIM execution plan, level of detail matrix, quality control report, Revit templates is another sore spot we had, and a statement of work that was specifically, I did two of these. One is the Region 5 BIM Standard. I also did an internal GSA only site that is dedicated to educating project managers on how to work in the BIM environment, how to write scopes of work, how to change over your deliverables, stop relying on paper, digital design reviews. All those things are covered in there. And that maybe would be another topic for some other time. So you have basically the documents. Each document comes with a complete guide that walks you through it. I think the BIM execution plan I'm not terribly happy with, but it's functional. You have a guide that basically walks you through the whole thing, tells you how to fill it out. Definitely not, in my opinion, the best. Certainly not the best that's out there now, but it works. Level of detail kind of got left half finished, but goes into some of it. Explains. This is all, obviously came out before. The better LOD guides have come out recently that go into a lot more detail, which is, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, of how much detail they go into. They can be overwhelming for a team to deal with, unless it's a massive project.
Is this the one, like we just saw one where somebody had invented a LOD 350?
Yeah. 350 is that new, it's to fix a problem. There is a problem there that they're trying to fix, right? That there's between fabrication level and design, that's too big of a jump. Like to not have something in between. What they maybe should have done is had 600 level as your as-built, or maybe just get rid of 500 because what the hell is 500, right? And just roll things up. So 500 is fabrication, 400 is that gray area between construction documents and fabrication, where it becomes a little more data rich and things. Yeah.
Right.
It's,
traditionally, the architect couldn't be all responsible for 400.
right.
Because he needed the contractor's involvement.
And 400 really should almost be like this weird spur that comes off of it. When you say it like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it makes it sound like it's some linear progression, and it totally ignores the fact that at 300 there's a sideways line that shoots out, and 400 gets done over here in its silo, and then someone needs to try to roll that back into 500, right? It totally ignores what's ultimately a total train wreck in the industry right now.
And then these numbers don't necessarily mean that the entire project is meeting that, because you could have certain parts of the project.
Yep. Yeah, and this actually does go into that as part of the execution plan and stuff, and it talks about it, the need to assign. LOD is all about an agreement, right? I'm telling you that my data is LOD 300, and that should mean something concrete to you and allow you to then execute your work based on that. That I've delivered what I owe you at LOD 300, and now you can proceed from that. unfortunately, again, that gets lost because people think it's this monolithic thing, right? That everyone on the team hits LOD 300 on the 14th of June, and then we move to the next step. That's absolutely not how it happens. Yeah.
G02 and G203, they're updates to LOD.
Okay. Is it?
Milestones,
Yep.
where it's defined different LODs, different disciplines, one milestone, instead of just 300, 200. It puts a milestone and shows that differential between planned differential. So I thought that's a really good job.
Right, you need to schedule it, yeah.
This may be broader than we need to go, but I know the biggest issue that I've experienced over the years is the discrepancy between agreeing what LOD you need to do and the actual contract language.
Yeah.
Very often the contract language is just your typical design bid build, and
Yep.
sometimes there's this false agreement that
Right.
we're going to be involved.
So I tell you, the absolute easiest fix for that, and what people just can't seem to make the jump to, is the scope of work needs to make it an absolute requirement that the BEP becomes part of the contractual agreement. And that fixes that problem. You're done. You can leave your SOW just how it's always been. You add that one line.
Typically, means nothing, so I don't have to
Right.
do anything more than
You put right in the original documents that the BEP is going to redefine the contractual agreement and will be adhered to by the team, period. That fixes the problem. But yeah, getting people to actually do that is a whole other issue. So I guess kind of maybe to wrap up on the LOD, that's something that definitely this is going to start to show its age on, because a lot more work's been done on that since this was released in 2013. The stuff that I think hasn't been addressed that this does, one of the things I thought was neatest about the standard was it was very practical. It didn't go into theory as much. It didn't talk about concepts. It flat out told you what to do. It told you, in a very basic terms, right? I'm amazed by how much BIM stuff there is out there that just doesn't even say a BEP is required on all projects, period. It's required. It's part of the standard. You have to do it. It's a requirement of the job. All views are required to be generated directly from the BIM data. Don't go making up nonsense on your own. It comes from the BIM data. That's a single source of truth. That's how you're going to do your project. Now, obviously, there are exceptions for small, inconsequential details, but in general, it needs to be every piece of data on that job comes from the BIM model. If you want to be successful, right? If you want to do conventional projects using a 3D model, sure, that's fine, go for it, knock yourself out. But if you really want to meet the big idea of BIM, every real world object better only exist in one model. It can't be duplicated. There's techniques with Revit that, copy monitor and things you have to do to make it work. But its original source has to be one time and one time only. Because if you start duplicating that object, it breaks everything. It gets a different unique ID, and the unique ID is sacred. That GUID is sacred and has to be preserved for the life of the building. And one of the things we were going to fix in the update was requiring that those GUIDs be maintained, and that should a change occur, should you need to, for whatever reason, an object went corrupt, there would be a process to alert everyone that the GUID had changed. That object had been substituted for a new object and gotten a new ID. Because when we all design the buildings, it's such a small part of the big scope. These buildings go on to live for if we do a good job, the buildings go on to live for hundreds of years. And that data needs to be maintained going forward, and that unique ID is critical to that maintainability. If someone just recreates an entire building model with all new IDs, that's an unmanageable disaster for the building maintenance, the FM. If you use FM as this big umbrella, one of the things we discovered in doing this is the amount of people, as you start going down the rabbit hole of FM, the amount of people involved, especially at GSA, became astronomical. There might be 10,000 people who need access to that data. and put that in perspective to the design team that built the building. Of a big project would be a few hundred. There's 10,000 people that need access to that data to keep that building running day to day and year to year. And that was a real eye-opener. It tied into what they were using as their FM system, was tied into how they tracked hours and how things got built. Maintenance people received work orders from that. It was amazing how complex these systems were and interconnected they were. And it really opened my eyes to, quite frankly, the reality that we couldn't do it. And so this standard doesn't try to do it. It tries to get the data ready to do it so that at some point in the future it's machine readable and structured in a way that can be at some future date brought into these systems and start to be used as a way to maintain it.
So simply, I think you pointed to a question that I had to ask. So at least 3 or so years ago, the direction that the GSA wanted is to have everything sort of captured in the Revit model for some future FM solution.
Yep.
That's
exactly what this does.
Today.
Correct. It's still, again, because in theory these live for hundreds of years, right? So the sooner you have, GSA is the biggest property owner on earth, the sooner you start getting your data in order, the better, because it's only going to get worse. It's going to get worse and worse and worse every year you don't start to organize it and don't start to get it in a meaningful fashion. And one of the things I think as an industry hasn't been addressed, paper was held on to. It was kept. Mylar was kept. It was seen as a physical thing of value, and it was protected and it was stored, and not in all cases, but in a lot of cases, and we all could go back to it. We ship a building owner a Revit model and that's it at the end of a project, we're doing them an astonishing disservice, because the likelihood that that Revit model will even be openable in 20 years is almost zero. And that's their record. What are they going to do?
Yeah, but that's just
right.
That was just some of my questions. So there's a certain expectation that if they had to have this unimaginable amount of information inside the Revit model, for them to take this Revit model and keep and then have everybody.
So let's talk. I said I had one battle with Richard, so we can go on to the second one. Richard was obsessed with Revit, and despite my warnings that he was going to get himself sued, because the government cannot require a software platform. That's not allowed. You cannot do it. And I did my best to try to protect him in writing the standard. And it was a constant give and take of he would read through it and say, no, I want that to say I require you have to do it in Revit. And then we'd be in these meetings and I would change it. I would go back after the fact and undo it. And I would say something like, GSA suggests you do this in Revit. You'll see that all through here if you read it. My attempt to try to stop that. I did get in the requirement of IFC, right? So that's the fail-safe. IFC will guaranteed be readable in 20 or 100 years. It's just a text file. Somebody will be able to make that work. A proprietary Revit database, not going to happen. It's not going to be readable. And that's troubling. We shouldn't be making buildings that are fleeting, that are temporary. A PDF lacks all that data richness, right? It dumbs down the data. We're creating this amazingly rich data set, and then we're locking it up in this file that when it's needed might not be accessible, right? Because a big building is going to go 25 or 30 years before the first major renovation. And that's when they're really going to need all that original data, and they're not going to be able to get to it. Depending on, they're going to have to redraw it from the PDFs. PDFs will probably work in 20 years. They can reconstruct it. There'll be camera-based scanners that we can float around in orbs like in the Alien movie. AutoCAD is very different than Revit. Revit's already showing us that
My argument is that where there's a need or where there's value, somebody will have a product for it.
We'll try, but unless Autodesk chooses to do it, no one else is going to be able to do it because Autodesk owns that format. And even then, it's going to be very difficult for someone to do that. And it's not a hard process. It's not a huge request to ask someone to write out an IFC at the end of the project. It takes an hour.
And my point was the reality is that the Revit is an amazing software, but to count out everything to be in it and be sort of the origin and the alpha and the omega of the building information, that's not really realistic. There has to be something that sort of simplifies the data. It still has the connection.
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, for that, it really is. It's three. This is a three kind of tier approach to solve that. It's IFC for geometry, and locking in and that then contains a unique ID for every object. It's COBie for the data. That also contains a matching unique ID, and that's how we make the connection back to the geometry and still carry this extended data. And then the third one is raw file dumps from especially the builders. And that is, the warranty information, all the hand sketches, photographs, videos, everything needs to be structured in a way that in the future a machine can read. And so in this case, I think we went with CSI codes. So this whole page here that we're looking through, this is what needs to be done when you submit your final data to GSA. So here's your requirements at the different stages of the project. And kind of, I was saying when I said this is really meant to be a very practical standard, this is the kind of stuff I don't see in other standards. I don't see a table like this that says what's a reasonable expectation at different levels of the project. You don't need the full data in the middle of the project. That's useless and takes up drive space. You need the full data at the very end. Creating COBie files throughout the course of the project is just creating a headache for the FM people to deal with. They need it at the end. They need it complete and checked.
What is you mean specifically if the real-time data access isn't provided? What real-time data?
Real-time data access would be Volt, ProjectWise, Buzzsaw. Essentially, you've added GSA personnel. When you mind, this is written if I were to write this as an architect and what I wanted to do, this isn't the standard I would have wrote because it makes a lot of extra work. This is written to protect GSA and ensure they get what they need. So that's the requirement. If you give them access and you foot the bill for giving them access, in trade, they'll back off on the amount of requirement of delivering data sets to them, during the lifespan of the project. And that was another fight we had.
Is there potentially a more modern version of this, or a step beyond that maybe being given out for current GSA projects?
I don't think so. I'm not sure. I would guess because it's not updated, and I see people in it. Because it's a Google site. I mean, this is the live site I'm in, and I see other people from around GSA. Some of the pages have comments on them now. Other regions are getting in and commenting on them. That was the other thing I wanted. I wanted it to be totally open and open to comment. So that anyone who wanted to make an account could comment on the pages. And the idea being is that it would be basically let people contribute to the standard. The original version 1, 2, and 3 of the standard was a wiki, a media wiki site, publicly hosted. Richard made me lock it down. I wanted to leave it open. Because I think that's powerful, right? To have an industry-driven, everyone contribute, with moderation, of course, standard. Yeah. But it didn't work out. I mean, we still were able to collect a lot of feedback for it.
We're working on a project that we started and this is
Is it? Okay. Do you hate it?
Honestly, I haven't gotten into, we just started using Revit for the
Oh, okay.
project, and I haven't gotten into it. Enough to know
Yeah,
if
well,
I-
it's very important whoever's responsible on the GSA side to communicate what their expectation is.
Yep.
It's gonna be much more expressive speaking to those people rather than just reading the document. Because
Yep.
the working
How
with
they
Richard,
interpret it's very different.
It was
Yeah.
he was asking us to do much more than what this was actually saying, and
Yeah,
and
that's
that
Richard.
didn't match our
Yeah.
contract or what
Yeah.
we were.
But it's a GSA, what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And risk not doing work with them again. Yeah. That's, so, okay, again, to kind of go into, some more, again, this goes into, how you're going to structure your data. How you're going to decide on an origin point, northing, and elevation. Right? Are you going to put the building at positive 100? There's language in here to deal with, you come into a campus situation with a lot of buildings, and those buildings are not properly geolocated. Which one wins? The origin, right? Because you want all the buildings in a common origin point. And so there's language in here that says the biggest building wins. Whatever the largest building is by square footage, that will be the origin point for all other buildings on that site. And if you are the unlucky one that gets stuck with the building, it's not right, it's part of your job to move it to the right origin point. So that when the GSA gets the data back, their campus references together correctly for them.
Just before the project survey plan.
No, that would be a way you could implement it, right? This doesn't go into telling you how to implement it. It tells you what the requirement is. The requirement is it will all align. So how you choose to implement that is up to you. That might be with the project survey point if you're using Revit. There's different techniques if you're using ArchiCAD. Different techniques if you're using MicroStation. So the goal was to be as platform agnostic as I could get away with. Yeah, okay, CSI divisions. So part of the requirement was that you'd have, and Richard's been in here playing around and blew out the image, but those are nice little folder icons. So this really gives you an idea of what you were required to provide. So you're required to provide CSI division numbers. Actually, I think I have a sample set on here. I know where this is. No, I don't. Okay, I guess I got rid of it. So you were required to provide not just your model data, you're required, and this went to the contractor. This wasn't a responsibility of the designers. The contractor was required to basically provide every document that was generated in the course of the project that had any value. Every video they took, they scoped the sewers, that needs to be provided. Submittals, provided. Signed, the actual ones that were signed, stamped, delivered, provided. Any reports, any MSDS sheets, hand sketches need to be scanned in. Any photographs that were taken, in particular if they were taken during construction, very important that those make their way in here so they don't get lost. Our people, one of the projects this is based on was the Federal Center. Our people found something that basically saved them on that job. They found pictures that were taken back in the 60s when the plaza was constructed that luckily the GSA had preserved that gave them indications of what was underground. So amazing that GSA happened to preserve all these photos for all that time, and they were actually able to find them in this labyrinth that is the GSA. We're trying to make that better, right, to ensure that those photos get captured and saved. Your shop drawings, RFIs, warranty information, manuals, operating manuals. This was actually a debate, because what Richard wanted to do was to hyperlink the manuals to the manufacturer's website when possible.
Yes.
He felt that was the better way to go, because then they would be updated live, and you always get the most current. And I said, what happens, Richard, in a year when that manufacturer goes bankrupt? You think they're going to leave their website up? Yeah, or change the part number. I mean, they're not going to keep a library of operator manuals for 50 years online and never change the link. So I won that one. Has to be in PDF, has to be in the folder. Then all these things, for Richard, and it's really nuts, they must be linked using URIs, not URLs, URIs. They must be linked from the Revit model to those folders. The problem is, there's a huge bug in Revit that it just doesn't work. It works like half the time, and then we'd be in meetings, it's like, well, why doesn't it work? You've done it wrong. Richard, I'm telling you, it's right. There's a bug. If I completely close out of Revit and reopen it, this link's going to work, which is a great, fun thing to do in a skyscraper model. Yeah, so, but whatever, it's, in there, and, well, it wasn't a problem for me. It was a problem for the person that had to build all those hyperlinks. BIM support files, again, this was on him. This is your shared parameters files, things like that, things that would make the Revit file usable, things that are required. That all needs to be supplied. Master coordination model, Navisworks or Calibre, whichever one you're using. You need to give the last one. One of the things we're going to add to that was that it had to be the last one. It had to contain the coordination history as part of the model, and it had to show that all things were resolved at the end. So it's like a snapshot at the end that tracked the resolution of problems. So it could basically be used as a lesson learned for the next project. Never got to writing that though. Model exports, so everything that you're required to export. The native BIM project data set, and then this deals with scanning and 3D imaging more generally data. It has to be provided, has to be in the folder structure, and submitted to GSA. Anything that was captured in the process of the job. Here's what little is written on the GUID. Everyone familiar with what that is? The GUID is?
Only in Windows.
Same thing.
Oh, it's the same thing?
Global unique identifier, that gigantic string that can never be repeated because of math.
It's the same thing. Oh,
Yep.
interesting.
Yeah. And this is really, this is the only way that a door can be tracked through its life cycle, is if it has this unique ID. This is its primary key for anyone who's familiar with databases, that tracks that door through its lifespan. If that unique ID gets blown out, how on earth are you going to match? You're going to have to manually match that door up again. That's not a big deal for a door. It's a huge deal for an entire building. It's almost unimaginable if you had this massive FM system deployed and someone came in and just blew out all those IDs and started over. It would be months and months worth of work to map all those over to the new ID. For someone at GSA, probably using a DOS prompt, because that's still what their systems were.
Say the store, there's a million components that go with it, arguing
Yep.
those all have unique numbers that are subset?
It's every object that's created within the model. So typically, the hardware is just part of the schedule maybe for the door. It's not part of the door object, and so those are not covered. So those are added secondary, and they're added to the COBE spreadsheet because they're not things that maybe ever need to be tracked. But the way COBE works is it's a hierarchy, and so those things are attached. They know they're attached to the door. So in the FM system, if I pick the door, it goes and queries everything that's dependent on that ID and relays it back. So the person can still use that geometry to navigate the FM system and get access to what is only text data, it's not graphical data about that door. And that's where the hardware would exist. And that's added either by the contractor to the COBE spreadsheet, or it's added by the FM people within the building itself. Does that make sense? Yeah. There's a lot of data that's tracked that way. Tons and tons of stuff that wire never makes it in a model, but we want to logically connect these outlets to their panel. Right? We want to know that I click on that outlet, what breaker it's on, and all that, and that's connected just through data, not through graphics. Dealing with spaces, zones, things like that. If you've ever done architecture work with GSA, you know they have crazy space rules, so much so that, or rooms rules, so much so that Revit actually built a special GSA room object into it, because they just define things very bizarrely. They don't conform to ANSI BOMA is why. They have different rules. I don't recall exactly what they are. It has to do with like whether you go to the center of the wall or the inside of the wall for calculating square footage. And of course that breaks all kinds of other things like energy analysis because they choose to do it different. But so there's some standards on that. Grouping and relationships is another one I don't see talked about too much, that I think really needs to be for any of us that have dealt with awful Revit models in the past. This is usually why. And this goes pretty deep in the weeds, right? About there's 5 types of relationships a model can have. Very conceptual, but if you get into it, this is how IFC tracks these relationships. Ultimately, it's how Revit maintains those relationships. And basically, as we go through this, we're telling them very specifically what needs to be done, right? And then we're giving some actual examples, right? So one really common one that I saw a lot from people who are new to Revit is faking it, right? Constraining walls to the wrong level and then keying in crazy numbers to push it to the right floor and doing bizarre things to make it work to get the drawing out, right? We're telling you, no, not going to happen, can't do it. Things need to be attached to the right levels, do not override the start points, things like that, build it correctly. As best we can, because it's a huge topic to try to address and cover. Some more examples, of how different objects need to be connected, right? So as we cycle through the types of selection in Revit, we're actually selecting whole systems. We don't want to see breaks in the system, which you see in almost every Revit model I've ever been in. Someone doesn't properly connect things and the whole system breaks down because they're not using the more advanced tools of Revit. And this is kind of a win-win in this case. This is how you should be building a Revit model, because if you're not using it right, and you're not benefiting from all the cool things it can do. But unfortunately, we live in a world where most people are on our C team for modeling, right? They're not on our A team. And they do crazy things on our BIM models, and they break them, and they call you when they don't open.
Well, how does connecting conduit like that between the equipment benefit the design engineer? It doesn't. It benefits the client. It doesn't benefit the designer. So
this is going to stretch my Revit knowledge a little, but I believe, to do some of the more advanced scheduling and things.
They don't need to be physically connected. There's intelligent connection.
Right. It could be either one, but I can't show an intelligent picture.
No.
I'd have to show a little cloud or something. Yeah. So this is meant to highlight and draw attention to, in this fact, these are both physically broken and logically broken. Someone basically just carried on and started drawing arbitrarily. They just snapped to some point and carried on. They didn't properly connect it.
Or assigning, light switches to the right panel.
Right, yeah. There's people out there who build these models and every single piece is just kind of floating in space. And they're not logically connected at all. And they do their schedule still in AutoCAD and manually fill them out. And, it's really bizarre, the stuff we saw. part of this project was we received dozens of Revit models that were coming into GSA. Took months to dig through them all and parse through them all. And the modeling behavior I saw was unbelievable. I mean, you just wonder, like, how people got their job done. It was so bad. Other firms, some firms were unbelievable. They taught me. I learned a ton about Revit by looking at what they had done. And I went, oh, wow, that's neat. And I wonder how'd they do that and how'd they get this to work. Yeah, the other ones were just awful, just horrible. There's more examples, with the plumbing system. So the physical connections, like you said, they do matter. And it matters. One of the things we didn't get in depth with is I maybe would have liked to. They have a huge problem at GSA that I found out through the different interviews we did. They fired all their maintenance staff about 10 years ago. They had lifetime maintenance staff that were government employees and made the decision that was now going to be an outsourced function and went through and fired every one of their building maintenance staff. That's created an absolute catastrophe within the GSA to the point where there were buildings, when we were doing this, that had active water leaks that had been active for over a month because they could not figure out how to shut it off. A BIM model would be I could click where I know the link is, and that would logically track me back to the shutoff.
A level 500 BIM model could do what you're talking about.
Yes, exactly.
Level 300.
Right. We're getting there, but at least, I tell you, if you follow these, at least what would happen is you could highlight the whole system and track it back to where you see a shutoff valve. Because I think mostly I guess 300 won't have the shutoffs necessarily in it.
So even if you do it, it's design intent.
Yeah.
It might
Yeah.
not be construction where it is, but logically following.
Right. At the time when you hand the final model off, it should have the shutoff valves in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So ducts were an interesting case when we did this, and I guess I don't know about this, but I was told there's a type of pressurized air system in which the diffusers are not connected by physical ductwork. You pressurize the entire interstitial space, and it just pours out of the diffuser.
Yeah, that's what the fun of the VAV.
Okay, I guess I never encountered it. Is that common?
It's a very inexpensive way of doing things.
Okay. Seems like a good way to shoot dust all over your office.
It depends. Return.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. The supply doesn't work that way.
Oh, okay. So it's just for return.
Right.
Oh, okay. And so is that a problem in Revit? Is there a way to logically connect those diffusers to that system?
No, we don't.
Well, the whole, in that system, the entire
Yeah.
ceiling is return. It's the entire thing. It's not something, but somewhere in the ceiling.
If I wanted to click on that diffuser and understand what system it was logically part of, I guess can I?
It's a common return system. It was all.
Oh, so it may be going to multiple. Oh, okay. So. Okay.
And anyways, it's only for a certain type of projects. Not most, but a lot, yes, it has to be ducted return.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah. VAVs were an interesting discussion over how to handle it, because they're, very cross-discipline. Who is going to own them, what model they'd end up in, how they'd be connected logically. At the end, we just said to do it because we didn't know how. So, yeah. I don't know if it's possible yet. In Revit, there's really not a great way to, tie the control system into this thing that's in the mechanical model, right? I mean, yet he demanded this be in here. So I had to make a unified model and fake it to make these pictures that show the whole system's highlighting. I know it's contrary to how almost every project's done, right? These things are in different models, and they do copy monitoring or whatever to logically tie them together, and I don't know how to reconcile that at the end of a project.
Yeah, that's the problem is that the biggest, real world issue with
Yeah.
the larger the project, the more it needs to be, breaking apart,
Split
broken
up.
apart,
Yeah.
and the more issues you have connecting them.
Right. Yeah, and then in keeping systems logically
Especially
tied
systems,
together. Yep.
architecturally, it's a lot easier.
Yeah, architecturally, I think the rules in here say that, especially for huge multi-stories, is the shell can be one model, and then each floor needs to be a model. Yeah.
Must or may.
How do we write that? It's a may.
Okay.
It was, yeah, you need to agree on a logical breakdown of the data and be consistent. And it recommended that you do it by floor or by wing. Yeah. Yeah. This was a big one for them. Wanted colors for MEP systems, which, whatever. It's, if memory serves, I think the biggest problem with this was getting this to work in Navisworks, which was their biggest concern, that they wanted to show this way in the coordination model. And I think when I was doing this, the only way to get that to work was to push it out through DWF and then link the DWF into Navis. If you wrote the Revit model out, because they were applied as filters, am I saying that right? Mm-hmm. And those do not export to Navisworks. But if you write a DWF out, it will export properly. I think at the time we wrote this, you couldn't. There was no way to do it. Yeah. Well, it would have been right around that. Yeah. Is that when it changed? Okay.
How
Yeah.
can you write down on color selections?
I thought you still that hot water heating supply is one shade of pink and the turn is
What about systems that don't exist? Let's say oxygen, whatever else. So you need to do a custom one. Are you able to customize that?
You create as many systems as you want, and they don't have their own color.
They can have their own
color.
Yeah, whatever you can make a search for, and then
Yeah. No minimum attribute standards. There's where it gets fun.
It doesn't all bring up a good point that this is just going to deteriorate as the validity gets ages. When you're talking.
Oh yeah, this needs to be kept up.
Right?
It needs to be kept up. Like I said, some of it's still very valid. I mean, if you want to do Kobe stuff, I don't know, a better one out there that's going to ensure life expectancy of this data. And keep in mind, those, again, that doesn't tell you how to implement the colors. That was just the story I was telling from my memory of struggling with how to do it. It just tells you have to do it. It doesn't tell you how. It actually gives you colors for Revit, AutoCAD, and straight up RGB value. You know, if you're drawing the stuff in whatever you're drawing it in, it has to be this color. How you do it, how you execute it, what tools, techniques you use is up to you. So I think from that standpoint, it does hold up. Where it breaks down is in level of detail, because that was such a huge topic to take on that we didn't really adequately address it. And now there's new documents out there that do address it much better.
This could go farther even in being more generic and not say code. It could simply refer to the latest, 10 years from now, that might be.
No, this needs to say Kobe. That parameter name needs to be Kobe, capital B, capital C-O-B, lowercase i-e, dash capital F. Very, very important. That has to be identical. Unlikely, I guess, at this point that there would be. There always could be, but I suspect it will be generations of Kobe moving forward. And the more data that's generated, the less likely that standard is to change.
And it is a government standard.
Yeah.
It's not an industry standard. Government
Yeah.
standard that various industries.
Right, and all,
like the
as far as I know, all the major FM systems support Kobe now. So that is how they get data from this, is Kobe.
Could the government change though?
Ada programming language was once the, government.
Yeah.
They could, but at
They
least point
could,
to that there
but-
needs to be a standard requirement. So
Right.
as it evolves, that will have to evolve too.
Right. And at that point, it then becomes, there'll be work done to make a logical mapping and all that. It's kind of like saying IFC will change. IFC evolves, but I highly doubt at any point that format will be totally abandoned and something totally new created. That seems very unlikely at this point because of the mass that it's reached. So these are your COBie requirements. And who the responsible party is. So the important part on this was the responsible party isn't who was going to fill it in, it was who was going to make the attribute. Who was going to insert that tag into Revit. Not who was necessarily going to fill it out.
Yeah, because there was another point of contention. There's a lot of information that the design team had to put in. We're not responsible for creating or finding out what the content was. And
so that's probably a misinterpretation on Richard's part. We talked about this a lot was, okay, Richard, this isn't how it works. You don't make them. The person designing it has no idea what the start date of the warranty is. But there's no reason that person can't throw that property on the object and ignore it. And it makes sense to get those properties in early.
Yeah.
URL properties, again, this should actually say URI because they're all pointing locally. So the debate we had of whether these were practical and useful.
And URI works in Revit?
It sort
I
of.
never used it.
So I haven't tested it in a couple years. It did work. It would work like 3 times and then it would just stop working. And, absolute URI always worked. So if you mapped it to F:\\/ whatever, but that's totally useless. It's got to be relative. It's got to be ./warranty info/PDF name. And that's the one that would work 3 times and then stop working, close it, reopen it, and it would work again.
What is the I? What is the I thing?
Universal Resource Indicator. Or no, URN. URN. There's URN, URI, URL. URN is what this should actually say. Network. Yep, network. So it's local. L actually means it's like an internet URL. It's going out, it's leaving your network. URN is a local data source. Yep. This is their SDM program, if you ever worked with them on it. Very important to them. And green building properties that actually don't know too much about. Another region had deployed these, built them into shared parameters, etc., and we just stuck it in here. So I don't know if these are right, wrong, insufficient, just what they need to be, not sure. I do know that these they have some level of importance in tracking building performance and etc. and lead and all that. I don't necessarily understand how all that works, so. And Omni class number. A bunch of tutorials in here, including ones like how to deploy COBie into Revit. Introduction to COBie. Yeah. Kind of step by step. There's some interesting things, how they get around things with COBie. So there's no way to attach data to a system or a zone in Revit. You can't attach additional properties to it. So what they've done is just made families that just are carriers for that data. You throw it on your site plan. This is Autodesk. Autodesk has a toolkit that you deploy COBie to into your model, and that's how they handle it. They just have these carrier objects that sit on your site plan out of the way and just carry this information about zones and systems. All the schedules for COBie are handled, inside of Revit. and they just dump out to Excel. So all these are pretty standard stuff.
Logo and template. Well, they were saying a couple years ago. I don't know if it's something.
Yeah, and definitely probably out of date, right? They top out at 2014. Yeah. That's a new note. Huh. Yeah.
The reference 2014 has it up to date, or?
2014 was the absolute last thing I did on this, like a week before we ran out of money on it. And they're basically, I opened the 2013 template and saved it. And yeah, I know. What am I going to do? Yeah. No, did I do that? I'm thinking back. You know what? I might have not done that. I think I did that with families and stuff. I think I did something like that. I think I had somebody helping me on it. God, I wish I could be for sure. Yeah, you might want to check. You might want to check.
Every region has their set of families.
No, so one of the things, GSA is weird, and one of the things I learned about how they work is that there is central control, right? There is a national GSA, and there's a national BIM standard that's very high theory. If you've ever read it, it has no practical advice at all. It is a hard thing to even read. And it's formatted weird, and it's kind of ugly. So what they really rely on is that individual regions come up with things and that they share. And so that one region comes up with this and invests in the standard, the others review it and then adopt it. And there's competition within the GSA to want to do that. They get attention, right? So we actually, for this standard, we got a TAP award. We won a TAP award for it. You know, so there's a lot of internal competition to do that, right? To create these things. Now you need to keep in mind, when this came out, this was pretty revolutionary in the world of BIM standards. Some of it still holds up, some of it doesn't. So, anyways, back to your question on the families. Region 3 hired AECOM to develop 3,000 families, I think, or something. As like a standard. Those were supplied to us and are down here. Couldn't tell you what's really going on in there. I certainly did not review 3,000 families, but they were, but they are provided for reference. I actually know the guy from AECOM. He's at Gafari now. And he's pretty top-notch Revit guy, so I would imagine they're pretty good. I don't know for sure, but I would guess they're reasonably solid, well-constructed families. Yep. Yeah.
Well, everybody from your office should be able to ask Richard, say, can I get on? So he'll get you on. You can download and implement.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm still on, but I was on a few days ago.
Yeah, so there's 43 people sharing it.
You can hit share and we'll just grab off all of our screens.
No, one of the last things I did before I left Gafari was I took myself off as the admin. Yeah, so it's grayed out for me. Yeah. you can help fill in some of these for us. This is kind of the protect Richard paragraph up here. You know, basically, yeah, we might say Revit 100,000 times in the standard, but it's really not required. If you got any templates you want to share, let us know. There's still no templates. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's a nice catch-22. Yeah. 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 That's about it. So any questions?
Like I said, if I had enough time to go, then I have enough time to make those kind of changes.
Yeah.
Great.
Hey.
Was that, and great. Thank you, Chris.
Okay.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
What happens to like the architect's GSA or the right to like
Stop recording.
pay facilitate the model or something or